Good. Okay, so introductions. So I said there, my name is Richard Tuig and I'm a program manager. I look after all kinds of research projects and programs, but focusing on some of the large European funding schemes such as Horizon and the Marie Curie Fellowship schemes that exist within Horizon 2020 and the new Horizon Europe program. So you have my email address here, and I also have a dedicated email address just for this program, which is neuroinsight@rcsi.ie. RCSI is the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, in Ireland, and RCSI is the lead institute for the NeuroInsight program. But as I'll explain, our program operates across many institutes in Ireland, all joined together under the umbrella of the Science Foundation Ireland Centres Programme. The other person you may need to be aware of is Professor Gianpiero Cavalieri, who is the Deputy Director of the Future Neuro SFI Centre. I'm going to give a bit more background on that centre in a minute. And he is also the Principal Investigator for this particular research programme. So he's the lead academic for the NeuroInsight Fellowships. So what is NeuroInsight? So we are a action, which is a program funded under Horizon 2020, and we're on the Marie Sklodowska-Curie co-fund actions. So we are a postdoc level fellowship program, and we aim to fund at least 33 fellowships, each one of 24 months. And the plan is to award them over 2 calls of proposals. So we're going to do an annual call for proposals, and from those proposals we will award approximately 15 or 16 in the first round, and then the remainder in the second round. Those numbers may change slightly depending on the number of applications we get, so we have some flexibility, and we may be able to offer a third call as well. So you may see us running for a little bit longer than that, depending on the funding we have available. So the co-fund action means that we're funded by Horizon 2020, so the European Commission, but we're also co-funded by the Science Foundation Ireland centres here in Ireland. So the money is coming from dual sources to fund these fellowships. And we have 2 collaborating Science Foundation Ireland centres. The first one's called Future Neuro, and the second one is called Insight. I'm going to give a bit about what each centre does and explain the intersection between the 2 and how that relates to our funding programme. So our aims are, I'm going to read this one out: deliver the future generation of research leaders equipped with the skills to assemble, integrate, and mine using machine and deep learning a wide variety of data types to yield novel insights into high definition precision medicine for neurological disorders. So there's a lot in there to unpack, and I'm going to give some kind of ideas and inspiration of projects that might fit with these aims later in the hour. And because we're a Marie Sklodowska-Curie action, while we're really concerned with funding excellent research, we're also very interested in career development for early career researchers. So we have a whole training program and other activities aimed at career development to go alongside our research funding. So one thing to just be aware of, we are funded under Horizon 2020. So if you're looking at the current round of Marie Sklodowska-Curie actions, they are funded under the new Horizon program, Horizon Europe. And some of the rules have changed between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. Some of them we're able to update and adapt, and some of them we have to stick with the Horizon 2020 rules. And I'm going to be quite explicit about those things where they come up. A few key dates for you. So we published our calls. We published our call documents on the 27th of October. So they're all live on our website. Our submission deadline is in January, the 19th of January, at 6 o'clock in the evening Irish time. And we'll go from then into a period of evaluation, and I'll go through the process for that, but we'll be aiming to do our peer review in the end of January, February, and then proceed to interviews. We have an interview round at the end of March. Awardees, you should know whether you're successful or not at the start of April. And then from then onwards, we'll be able to start fellowships once the kind of administrative recruitment processes have taken place in April. And we are expecting people to move to Ireland to take up these fellowships. So it may take 2 or 3 months for those kind of visa and work permit processes to take place and for people to actually relocate, and that's okay. So to carry on with the theme of what is the program. So you may be familiar with the MSCA, the Actions on the Mary Sklodowska-Curie Scheme, and you may be familiar with the standard postdoctoral fellowships. So these are a Europe-wide scheme of research excellence and career development, and they're bottom up in that if you apply for a postdoctoral fellowship on the standard MSCA, you can apply in any field to work with any supervisor in any location in Europe. They always require some degree of mobility, and there's criteria around that defines what mobility is required. And they have this dual focus that I've mentioned before on excellent research and career development. So we are a subset of these actions. And because we're co-funded by some national programs here in Ireland, we actually limit our field to a certain set of research domains. So we have neuroinsight themes, and we have a pool of supervisors that our applicants have to apply to. But we still have the same requirements for mobility, and we still have the focus on excellent research and career development. In addition, because we're a small scheme and we take our fellows in as a cohort, so we have 15 or 16 fellows coming in the first round, and then an equivalent amount coming in the second round, we're able to run our own training and development and career development program as a group. And it's really good to be able to bring fellows together to share experiences and to jointly forge a new career path within our research fields. So what are our research fields? So we've defined 4 challenge domains, which are quite broad, and we're expecting applications to tackle primarily one of these domains, but you may be able to select a secondary one, but you will have to identify a primary challenge that your research concept, your proposal is focused on. And these are, number 1, ethnographics, which is about how data from those with a neurological disease are collected, and then how they're shared to develop new precision medicine, and with a focus on data capture methods, and then data collection and sharing and management. Second one is advanced analytics, so how to use patient data to predict important clinical events, and that may include response to therapies. Third domain is genomics, so the analysis of genomic data and other omic data from humans and animals, and using that to inform diagnosis and therapeutics. And the last one is in the area of patient impact. So we have huge amounts of data coming through from patient registers and from e-health initiatives. We want to use insights from those data to inform more effective and targeted healthcare provision. So as you can see, these are quite broad, and you could pick one of these and you could come up with a huge range of research ideas and concepts that work towards one of these challenges. So beneath these, there are a set of subtopics which we've outlined to help you identify people to work with and to help you form your concept and put it towards something perhaps a little bit more concrete. And some of these are around data science and data analytics and data skills. And then some of these are around neurology and diagnostics and therapeutics and e-health. And you should be able to mix and match these and come up with a research concept that spans the two. And it's really exciting to be able to look at the intersection between these subtopics and these research fields. So where have these subtopics come from? Well, they've come from the Science Foundation Ireland centres that I work in and that our supervisors work in. So what is an SFI centre? So it's called a centre, but actually a centre is a distributed entity. So it's geographically distributed across Ireland. The Science Foundation Ireland set up these centres as a way of grouping together some academics to work on a common theme. So each SFI centre is funded for 6 years, and a group of academics get together and propose a portfolio of research on a specific theme. And we have 2 of these centres collaborating in our scheme. One of these is Future Neuro, which is the SFI Centre for Chronic and Rare Neurological Diseases. It's very much a challenge-based centre looking at chronic rare diseases such as epilepsy, ALS or motor neuron disease, and some of the rare neurological diseases that are coming through. The collaborating center is Insight, and Insight is more of a competency-based center. And Insight is very large, and it brings together a whole set of researchers working across the field of data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, multimodal data analysis, lots of data integration, manipulation, and then algorithms and deep learning and machine learning and things that you can do with data. So what we're looking at is applying these data analytics skills to the challenges that are in chronic and rare neurological diseases. So the way the centers are set up is to be outward facing, so they're looking for collaboration. So these SFI centers as entities do a lot of work with industry, do a lot of work with intersectoral partners, and because Ireland is a reasonably small ecosystem, this means that any company can come to Ireland, decide that they want to work with a particular academic in any university, and then they engage with just one entity, being the SFI centre that the academic is affiliated with. And that's the core purpose of the SFI centres. So they do excellent research that is applied and that it's outward facing and it's open for collaboration. And it's a really exciting environment for doing research in that mode. So like I say, they're geographically distributed. So the Future Neuro Centre has partners in Trinity College. RCSI is the main host, but then also we have people in Maynooth and UCC and across Ireland. The Insight Centre is much larger, and it has partners in DCU and UCD and all these different excellent research universities across Ireland. Just as Ireland is most of the population is centred in Dublin, 4 or 5 of our host institutes are actually in Dublin, but we do have Galway, Limerick, Cork, Waterford, further out in Ireland. Ireland's still a small country, so the furthest you possibly be expected to travel between these institutes is around 2 to 3 hours, more like 200 kilometres. So everything is reasonably close together and focused around the lead institute, which is RCSI, based in Dublin. If you want to read about any more of these universities, there's a little bit in the guide for applicants, but then you can go to their website and their research office and you can find out a lot more about the particular strengths and interests of each university. But what about the SFI centres? So like I say, the SFI centres are built around capacities and challenges, but each one has some really exciting facilities and infrastructures and capabilities that can inform and help and steer research. We have a few of them called out here on this slide. So really relevant to this call is data, right? So we have that in the form of biobanks, and a biobank is an organized collection of samples. It may mostly data, but sometimes there's samples there and they're stored for research, so they're searchable and they're organized. We have biobanks with brain tissue, biobanks with blood, biobanks with spinal fluid that we have access to within our centres. We also have very large data sets on genome sequencing because we're involved in some of the largest consortia in the world in ALS and epilepsy. And we have really big data sets of imaging, monocoding mRNAs, and the ability to sequence and build and add to these data sets through the facilities that we have and the sequencing capacities that we have. In eHealth, we have the world's most extensive ALS patient register we have access to through our PIs, and that's linked with the international ALS registers. We have some very large data sets of patient records in epilepsy, and also some emerging data sets in MS and in some of the rare neurological diseases. And through the academics that are already working here, you can propose to get access to and use this data. We have some real strengths in clinical trials and preclinical trials and the ability to recruit patients and work directly with clinicians. And then in the Insight Centre particularly, we have some very high strength computer power, high performance computing centres spread out across our host institutes. I haven't gone into all these details here because normally it's out of date by the time I look at them, but we are if you need computing power, if you need processing power to do the work that you want to do, you will be able to find it somewhere in our network. So over the next, say, 4 or 5 minutes, I just want to throw out a few ideas of projects that could fit with these themes. Now, you don't have to limit yourself to these. These are just ideas that may get you started, or you may be able to compare your own ideas to these and see if you have the same kind of structure. There's more details about these on our website, and each one of these has some PIs, potential supervisors, that you could contact to talk more about these. The first one is about service dogs. Service dogs are animals that are used by people with physical conditions, neurological conditions especially we're interested in here, to support them in going about their daily life. And we're thinking about seizures. So a seizure is a significant event, but sometimes they're very serious and they can incapacitate their owner, or sometimes it can be quite a mild thing where the owner may not even know they're going through them, but their service animal may be able to pick up on it, may be able to detect on it. And if the owner does need the animal to communicate that they need help or they need some kind of assistance, that can be quite difficult for a dog to do, as you can imagine. So there has been some work with trying to get dogs to wear sensors that detects whether any change in the dog and the dog's behavior is able to be used to understand whether the owner is going through something. So there's some existing publications and papers in this, but we think it can be combined with other data. There's the wearables data that's coming through. There's the health monitoring data from both the owner and the animal, and also things like video data and sound data from the surroundings, and lots of different data streams that we think you could analyze. You can look at real service dogs within this project and use them to generate real-time alerts as to the condition of the owner, and either call for help or track behavioral changes over time and see if conditions are worsening or improving in the person with, say, epilepsy or a neurological condition. Another one, you can see common themes in these around large data sets, diverse data sets, and treatment of data and ways to do this. So this one is about epilepsy in particular, though you could really apply it to any neurological condition. So we have access to some huge data sets, diverse data sets, things like images, EEG recordings, video, and then sets of information from non-invasive biomarkers, so where we've done diagnostic processes with patients and on patients. And in this idea, we're thinking that you could take data in real time and process it using machine learning, using deep learning, and use that pre-processing and processing to present clinicians directly with information to help them diagnose and perform their prognosis, give their opinion on the condition of the patient. So this is something where you'd be looking at huge data streams that are coming through in real time and applying machine learning to them. And like I say, we have access to clinicians, we have access to data. What we need is the person to come in with the machine learning and the deep learning skills to apply them. It'd be great if they had familiarity with clinical data sets, but we have all those things within our network already. A slightly different way would be to combine some of that data with genomic data. So looking at the genetics and the profile of patients and applying the same kind of machine learning, deep learning techniques, but trying, instead of looking at real-time data to support decisions in clinicians, here you'd be looking at patient data and trying to come up with tailored individual treatment outcomes based on what we know about them, and based on the data that's coming through. So you'd be able to compare and extend existing knowledge on genetic traits related to neurological disorders with new data that's coming through. And the last one here is again looking at genetics, so gene expression and neurophysiological data, and trying to look at brain network dysfunction, but over time, so longitudinal investigation of brain performance and brain activity. Because we know that brain networks, hyperexcitable brain networks, are a common feature of epilepsy and many disorders. So we have access to brain tissue, we have access to biofluids, single cells, RNA sequencing, and we can use all this data from samples, from experiments, and also from patients, and try and integrate it and manipulate it and identify new indicators, biomarkers, pathways that could lead to new therapeutics. So there's really exciting work that could be done in this field by bringing data skills and data analytic and data management skills into the bioinformatics and the neurophysiological domain. Good, so that's the inspiration. I'm going to come back to the practicalities of what a fellowship is and what the award is, and then how to apply. So our fellowships are 2-year fellowships, so you have 2 years to work on the problem that you put forward. And like I say, they're fully funded by Science Foundation Ireland and the European Commission. So a successful fellowship application will result in a contract of employment for 2 years, and that contract will say you're here to execute the project that you proposed. And you will be reporting to the primary supervisor who you've named, and you'll be employed by their institute. So that's defined by your choice of supervisor. The salary here, now, what I'm presenting here is an indicative salary. If you look in our terms and conditions, similarly to the Marie Curie fellowships, we explain the total award, which includes all the employer's costs that are incurred by the institute that's employing you. So that's a larger figure. What I'd like to give you here is a real idea of the salary that you will get as an Insight Fellow, a Neuro Insight Fellow. And it's made up of components. So you have a living allowance. Everybody is entitled to a mobility allowance because you will have moved or relocated to access this funding. And if you have or acquire dependents during the fellowship, then you're entitled to an additional family allowance. In the Horizon 2020 MSCA, you are only entitled to a family allowance if you had dependents on the call deadline. With us, we've taken the Horizon Europe definition, which is now that if you acquire dependents during the scheme, you will additionally acquire the family allowance. So that's one change between the two Horizon programs. What that results in is somewhere between 42 and 47k in euros gross salary, with an additional 5,000 if you have dependents. That variation is because different institutes apply pension rules slightly differently. So the actual amount we're spending on you as a fellow is always the same. Just some of the employers put some of your money towards a pension, which in the end of the day is going to you. One thing we do early on in the fellowships is explain to our fellows how to manage their own pension and how to best take advantage of that money that's been invested in them. We do also supply money for research costs, which does vary depending on the supervisor that you're assigned to work with. So if you're assigned to work with somebody in the Future Neuro Center, we expect that you'll be doing more lab-based work and more physical sample-based work. So the amount allowed for research costs is higher. If you're assigned to someone working in the Insight Center, we expect you'll be mainly doing data analytics. So the budget for research costs is slightly lower. And then we provide everybody with a centrally managed training program. So I look after that, and that's all spent on you. And importantly, you get to be a full Marie Curie fellow, and that's a real boost to your CV, and it's a real attractive thing for future employers that you are and always will be a Marie Sklodowska-Curie fellow on your CV. A little bit more about working conditions and the welfare. So as I've said there, you'll become a contract researcher, essentially a postdoctoral level researcher with your host institution, and you'll be affiliated to one of either the Future Neuro or the Insight Center, the SFI Centers for Research. So therefore, you will get full access to the institutional supports, all the national supports, health services, employer assistance, as will be available to an Irish national. If you want more details about working in Ireland, then have a look on your Access the Irish site, and have a look on Citizens Information, the Irish site. If you're coming from outside the EU, you are entitled to come in and work in Ireland as a researcher on a special scheme called the Hosting Agreement Scheme. There's all the details about that are on your Access Ireland. And it's a good scheme because it means you can bring your family with you and you can bring your dependents with you, and they are also entitled to work, and they are also entitled to access things like schools and child healthcare because you are on the hosting agreement for all researchers. Who can apply? So these are the eligibility rules. So you have to meet these in order to be able to apply. So we have two main routes to apply. One is for incoming fellowships. So that is where you're moving to Ireland to conduct the entirety of the 2 years researching in Ireland. And for those, you have to move to Ireland. You have to relocate to Ireland. The standard rule for that is that you haven't lived in Ireland for more than 12 months in the 3 years prior to our call deadline, which is January the 19th. We do have a slightly relaxed rule for that. If you fulfill some eligibility criteria for being either restarting your career or reintegrating to Europe from a third country outside Europe. All the definitions for these, all the actual wording is in our guide for applicants and also on our website. So do have a look at that. And if you have any doubt over these, about whether you meet these, just email me and ask, and I can go through the criteria with you and make sure that you're eligible to apply. The second route is for the global fellowships. Global fellowships mean that you're applying to work for the first 12 months in a country outside of Ireland, and then you're going to return to Ireland. And for those, the mobility rule applies to the country that you're going to first. So you must relocate to another country for the first 12 months, and you can't have lived or worked in that country for more than 12 months in the 3 years prior to the deadline. You must be an experienced researcher, which means you have to have formally completed all the requirements that entitle you to have a PhD, or you have to have equivalent research experience, and that is quite clearly defined in on the website and in the core documents. You have to have 4 years of full-time research experience since becoming eligible to pursue a PhD, whether you did or didn't go for the PhD. You must be fluent in English. Typically, if you have conducted your PhD in English, then that's okay, but there are criteria and benchmarks around the exams that prove that you are fluent in English if you're not a native speaker. And you must have the explicit support of one of our NeuroInsight supervisors to be able to apply to the program. So they have to be expecting you to apply, they have to know you're applying, and therefore, if you're successful, you go and work with them. And you have to be applying on one of our program themes that I've been through there. So the supervisors there, they must be from our pool of supervisors, and you can go on our website and you can see the directory of all the eligible supervisors who you can apply to work with, and you can contact them and ask them, approach them, explain that you're interested in applying to the program, the kind of areas of research that you want to work in, and then they will agree to support you. If they've already taken on candidates or they don't think you're in quite the right realm for them, they may refer you to someone else, or they could refer you back to me and I can help you find someone else. This is the actual table of eligibility rules. So the only thing I'll say here is if there's any doubt, just contact me, give me an email and I'll go through the rules. The other thing to say is there's definitions in here about associated countries and EU member states. Those definitions are from the Horizon 2020 rulebook because we are funded by the Horizon 2020 program. So there's a slight change in associated countries between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. Please stick to the Horizon 2020 definitions. Beyond those eligibility rules, I have a number of points here of what we're looking for in a fellowship. The thing to note here is that these are things that will be assessed by the expert review, by the remote review. So I'm not going to be able to tell you whether you have the right proposal or the right idea to fit with these things. This is going to go out beyond me to an independent set of reviewers. These are challenging to meet, and we are challenging you because we want you to do excellent research and we want you to really try and come up with something that will break new ground in our field. So it can be a little daunting looking at some of these, but try and talk to people, and I'm going to go through some of the things around intersectoral and PPI later on in the presentation and see what you can come up with. And if you don't hit them all, but you still are strong enough to get funded, then we will fill the gaps when you're here as a fellow. So the things we want are excellent research, things that align with our research domains, and we want to see some career progression, which means that you come in as one thing, but you're expecting to move forward in your career and leave as something else. And think about that journey when you're writing your proposal. We want to see intersectoral engagement. It's really important to the Marie Curie program. It's really important to the SFI centers. So we're asking you to propose a secondment to either an industry or clinical intersectoral settings of between 3 and 6 months. So come up with something realistic, talk to your supervisor about the connections that they have, or you may be able to propose something, and include that in your proposal and describe how that benefits your research or your career or both. We want to see public and patient involvement, which has quite a clear definition, and I'm going to have a couple of slides just on that later on, so I'll come back to that. And then for the global fellowships, we want you to propose a 12-month outgoing phase, which can be to any host outside Ireland, an academic host or an industry host. If it's an academic host, you still need to propose that secondment to the intersectoral setting on your return. The other thing we'd like to see is a supervision team. So because we're operating across interdisciplinary domains, we're operating across multiple research centres and research programmes, we want you to think about how you're going to fit into that. So you will have already proposed your primary supervisor, who's the person that will become your line manager. But we'd like you to look in our supervisor pool and propose a secondary supervisor. Ideally, we think that that should come from the other centre. So if you're working with the Future Neuro team, you should think about someone who can supervise the data analytics part. If you're working with the Insight data analytics team, think about someone that can supervise the neurology part and provide steering, advice, application, whatever they need to do to benefit your proposal. And we'd like to see an intersectoral supervisor, and that normally that would be defined by your target secondment. Now, you may not have all of that concretely defined in your proposal, but you should be able to suggest something that is realistic and you can put in place when you get here, should you be funded. And of course, we can help you support that. Like I say, these are not eligibility rules, so you are free to come up with whatever you want. So if you think you have a better idea for a supervision team than what we've put forward here, you could put it forward, but you'd really have to justify why it's the right thing for your project and your proposal. These are things that therefore you'll see come out in our evaluation criteria. So we publish in our guide for applicants the evaluation criteria that experts will look at when they're looking at your proposal. So you will see in here things like the intersectoral aspects. You will see the fit with the SFI centre environment that you're going into, the institution and the team and the centre. And you will see the appropriateness of that environment for your proposal. If you compare these to the standard Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship criteria, there are some differences. So we don't ask you to propose your own training program and your own training scheme because we are giving that to you. But you may propose some individual training elements that are important just to you and just to your research. We also don't ask you to describe in great detail the quality of the supervisor because we've already told you who the supervisor has to be. It has to come from our pool of supervisors. But you do have to explain why that supervisor is the best fit for you and for your research and why they are the team that is going to help you get to where you want to be with both your career and with your research. So what do you have to do? Well, once you have a supervisor identified, you start developing your concept for your research proposal. And there's templates for these on our website. And there's a 10-page research proposal plus your CV, and they have to fit together and be a coherent submission, a coherent proposal for work. When you go into our submission portal, you'll also have to do an ethics self-assessment. And if you flag any ethics issues, potential ethics issues with your proposal, then you'll have to provide an additional ethics statement on how you're going to deal with those. If you're proposing on the Global Fellowship Scheme, you'll need a letter of support from both your return phase host, which is the Irish institute that will be employing you, and your outgoing phase host. If you're applying for the Global Fellowship Scheme, I'd recommend you contact us straight away and we can help you with these letters and make sure that they are available and it is a realistic outgoing phase that you're proposing. Like I say, all the templates are on our website and there's notes on the templates as to what we're expecting in each section and how best to come up with the research plan and how to make it into one coherent submission. So go and have a look at those and have a read through them straight away. All the guides, all the terms, all the templates are up there on our website, and the application portal is open now, so you can go in and look at that and look at the questions and things that are there and that you'll need to answer in order to submit a proposal. If you have any questions, email me, call me. Our deadline is January the 19th. That's not going to be extended because our eligibility rules are all based around that deadline, so we actually can't move it. So, get started. If you go to the application portal, like I say, you can go there now and you can register and you can have a look at what's required, and there's links there back to our website to the core details and the core documents. It's fairly straightforward. I'm not going to say much more about it. There's just one thing I'd like to call out is on the first page, it asks you to name your submission, and that's a name that is only there for you. This is a system that sometimes is used for awards where you're allowed to do multiple applications to a single scheme, and therefore you might have 2 or 3 different names for applications that you're putting in. In this case, you're only allowed 1 submission, so whatever you name it is your own name. You'll then go through the applicant information, which isn't shared with viewers, with expert reviewers or anyone else. So that's just statistics and details for the call, for the management of the call. And then the project and the project description, that is information that is shared with the viewers. And these are the things that are specified as you go through. You'll see the notes. There's an eligibility self-assessment. There's an ethics self-assessment. These are questionnaires. And then you have an upload tab where you upload your main proposal and your CV and potentially an ethics statement. Some final declarations and you're through. You can come back to this, you can submit, and then you can come back and revise at any time up to the call deadline. So it's all open there for you to use and for you to build your application within this. And like I say, I think it's quite self-explanatory, but if you have any issues with it, just come back and ask me. What happens after submission? Well, after the 19th of January, we do a quick eligibility check. So a group of us will look at your submission and your self-declaration of eligibility and make sure it's all in line. And you'll get a notification to say, yes, you're eligible for the call, everything is in order, you can move forward. We don't ask for any documents at this time. So we're only going to ask for evidence and eligibility evidence at the end of the process when we're issuing awards, because we don't collect a lot of personal data and a lot of personal documents at the start, which means you need to be really sure so you're not wasting your own time that you are eligible when you put the submission in, and the self-assessment should guide you through that process. You then go through a phase of remote review where a group of international experts will look at your proposal and look at it in terms of excellence, in terms of impact, in terms of implementation, and you have the criteria for that published there in the guide for applicants. You'll get some feedback and a decision as to whether you're taken forward to the next round after that, and then those who are taken forward will be invited for interview. And the interview, we look more at your motivation, we look a little bit more at your alignment for the program, and we look at how realistic and feasible your application is. And then we go down to a final ranking where we take into account both the remote review and the interview scoring, and put together a ranking table, and we fund from the top downwards until we run out of money. What happens then? Those who are awarded a fellowship will get a notification that they're awarded, and then they'll get an offer of employment from their host institute. And that can take a few weeks to go through the administration, but then we're expecting you to relocate anyway, so we should have time for you to get your visas, work permits, everything in order, and move to start. We think most people will be in place by June next year, and we'll be able to start our training and career development program. Before the interview, I've put there that there's a PPI den, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. So a few more things about what's important to us and what's important to the scheme. So career development is very important to the MSCA actions in particular. And we are looking for early career researchers who want to develop into something more, who want to go from this into either a position of leadership in academia or move back into industry or into sectoral places where they will be forging new ground in our research themes. So we will ask everyone to come up with a career development plan in their first couple of months as a fellow. And we do have this really nice supervision team and mentorship team who will be looking after you through your fellowship. We will make great efforts to get you into sectoral and more interdisciplinary exposure and build you into a more rounded research professional. And all of that is done through a centrally run training program. And there's a whole load of supports within the SFI centres and within the host institutes towards applying for more funding and towards applying for things like jobs for lectureships, and moves into our industry partner network or our clinical partner network. A couple of sample activities we've got planned. So the PPI Den is something that we will be doing, like I say there, just before the interview, but we will also repeat it during the fellowships. And this is where we will have fellows and candidates will pitch their ideas to a panel of patient and public representatives, and they will give feedback on how to incorporate public and patient involvement into their research. So this will happen. You will be invited, if you're invited for interview, to take part in one of these before your interview. If you're then successful, you'll be invited to take part in one of these in the first 6 months of your fellowship as well. So you'll be able to really hone your skills in including PPI in research. Again, I'm going to go into more definitions about what PPI is in a second. We'll then be running a training and development program, a career development program, which is based around schools, both specific skills to our research themes, but also transferable skills and networking opportunities. This is here in draft. But once we know the cohort of people, we'll be able to do a training needs analysis and build this around you. So if you have specific ideas that you think we should incorporate in our training and development program, you could propose them in your submission to us at the start. And we do have lots of partners across Europe. The one I've called out here is the Human Brain Project, which is a flagship program across Europe, but they have their own education program and infrastructures and research visit systems that you may be able to take advantage of through your research fellowship. So PPI, I've mentioned this a few times, and it's public patient involvement, and it may be a new concept to a lot of you, and it's a reasonably new concept to the research domain anyway. So it's quite a challenge that we've set you to incorporate PPI into your proposals, into your research plan. So we are here to help you, and we are here to advise you on it, and I can give you support and advice on where to look to get information on how to do this. And as I said, if you get through the first phase and through the remote review, you'll be invited to DENS where you're really pushed to find ways to build more PPI into your research plan. So you will be helped with this through the scheme. What we want from you is to be open to do this and to understand what it is and to understand the merits of it. So what is PPI? It's the development of active partnerships between researchers, patients, and public stakeholders to develop research which is relevant and useful to patient and public needs. So the public is not just everyone, it's people who have specific interest in the research. So patient support groups, charities related to our research themes, healthcare providers, and policymakers. Patients then are people who are living with or caring for people with neurological diseases. So there's patient groups that you can access that have people who are willing to be involved in research. Involvement, and this is important, involvement is actually being part of the research project. So you may hear of engagement. Engagement is where you talk to people about your research. You may hear about participation. Participation is doing research on people or involving people in studies. These are very valuable things in research, but these are not quite enough. What we want is involvement, which is where researchers collaborate with patients and the public across the entire research cycle. So think about that hierarchy of involvement and try and push towards the top level. There are networks. We have an Irish network called PPI Ignite, which brings together all our host institutes to build capacity and build ways of doing PPI. There's a very good one in the UK that publishes a lot of information called PPI Involve, which you can look at, which is managed by the National Institute for Health Research in the UK. These are examples that are taken from that Involve network. So examples of PPI contributions, you may look for feedback and advice on topics, directions of your research program. So you may set up a small steering committee or a small advisory committee that is made up of public and patient experts, or you may be able to draw on an existing steering group and ask them the questions. You may be able to find a relevant group that you can request feedback and advice from. PPI contributors may help you recruit members of patient populations to participate. So the participatory part is there, But what we're looking for here is the PPI people to help you with the recruitment specifically, so they get involved earlier on in the process. They may be able to particularly help you with the ethics, because ethics is something where you really want to test out what you're doing on people that are outside of research, people that have a new view or a general view on what you're doing. So they can take part in ethical reviews, help you co-develop compliance procedures, ethical requirements procedures, make sure they're informed by different perspectives than your own. And really, if possible, you can get patient representatives, public organization representatives to be co-authors, be reviewers, be part of your journal articles, presentations, and other dissemination activities. So that's engagement, but you're bringing in the PPI representatives at an early stage in the engagement to get them really involved in the dissemination and engagement of the research. So I hope that's helped you understand PPI a little bit more. There's lots of good resources for PPI if you look them up. Right, so the last thing I want to do is give some general tips and advice on how to build a proposal and how to approach our program. The disclaimer here is I'm not involved in the review of the proposal. So I can't influence whether you get through or not. So anything that I tell you here is just advice. How you actually go through it and how you approach your research is entirely up to you. The things I'd say is, number one, confirm you are eligible. Don't waste your time applying if we're going to find out at the end of it that you haven't actually been eligible to apply. So whatever you need to do, contact me, check the rules, make sure that you are able to apply. We really want everyone to have equal opportunity. So if you are disadvantaged in some way, if you can't access journals, if you can't, because of the situation that you're in, wherever you are in the world, you feel that you're disadvantaged relative to somebody who's in an easier spot, please do contact us, because I do have facilities where I can help you through. The only way I know that is if you register your interest with me. So there's two ways of doing this. You can go to our grant portal and you can start your submission straight away. So I have your name and I have your email address, or you can just send me an email and say, hey, I'm thinking about applying. Can you keep me in the loop if anything happens or if there's any additional information? Do contact a supervisor as early as you can and get their support so that you can use them for advice and steering to help you define what your project is, and you are therefore eligible because you have their support. And do make sure that you know that you can execute what you want to do at their host institute, because that's where you will be based if you're a successful fellow. If they don't have what you need, we have a really good network for other sites and other infrastructure, but you will have to describe how you're going to access them in your proposal. We want ambitious, we want interdisciplinary research, so that is going to be risky. And we do ask you to do some assessment of the risks and your strategies for managing risk in your proposal. So think about what happens if things don't go quite right. What will your fallback option be? What will your contingency be? Or what can you do instead? Or how can you reduce the risks or reduce the impact of those risky events occurring? The intersectoral engagement, and I could say this to the PPI as well, they are challenging things to include. So do make sure they're realistic. Do make sure that they fit with what you want to do in your research. And remember that this is a research and career project, so they could contribute to both aspects of your fellowship in terms of excellent research, but also in terms of developing your career. In terms of developing your career, think about this is a 2-year fellowship. You don't want to be unemployed at the end of the 2 years. So what are you going to do immediately next? So if you're applying for funding for your next step, or if you're applying for a job to go, if you think your next stop is a permanent job, you should include activities that take you towards that as early as possible in your research plan, really. I've mentioned the Marie Sklodowska-Curie postdoctoral fellowships a couple of times. There's no issue with applying to that and then applying to us. So the deadline was quite recent for the postdoctoral fellowship. So you may have a proposal that's more or less ready to go and fits with our program. But do be aware that our assessment criteria and our requirements for the research proposal are slightly different. There are things that you don't need to include for our plan, and there are things that you do need to include, and look at those variations in the evaluation criteria. Obviously, if you're successful in both, you'd only be able to choose one, but that's a nice position for you to be in. As much as we'd like to, we won't be able to fund everybody that applies. So there is some effort required in writing these proposals and coming up with a submission, but really make sure that you use that process to develop the relationship with the supervisor and to establish a network with them and the people that you're working with. In these schemes, we've had lots of these schemes in Ireland before, and we do see people applying, not quite being successful in this funding, but their supervisors have still been able then to direct them towards other funding schemes because they've worked together and because they know each other and because they have that relationship. So it should be a beneficial process, whether you're funded or not, but hopefully you're funded. And then finally, where to get support. So you can come and ask me, but like I say, I have really no influence on the actual evaluation process. So I can give you advice on eligibility, and I can give you general advice and general tips. If you're looking for advice on whether you have the right research proposal for the scheme, go and ask your peers, find mentors, find local research offices or the research office of the host institute you're applying to, and ask them for specific advice and reviews around your research proposal. You can get a lot of information from people who are working in the field already, as well as your supervisor and your supervision team that you're proposing. You should be in touch with them all the time. Okay, I'm right at the end. The last thing I want to do is say we're going to have another event a week from now, so this time next week, which is our public launch. So here, today I've been through a lot of administrative details, a lot of aspects of the scheme that are just specific to you as candidates. Next week, we're going to talk about just exciting ideas and inspiration. So you're welcome to come along to that. You won't find out any more about the program, but you may find out a bit more about the research fields that we are working in, and you will see some of our supervisors talking about really exciting things where they think we can apply data science to neurological fields. So come back later. I'll be publishing the details of that very shortly on our website and on Twitter, so come back and look for that. Okay, so I'm at the end. Thanks everyone. I've been talking a lot. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but if you are online and you would like to ask some questions, I'll hang around here for the next 5 minutes. Otherwise, you can always email me, whether you're watching the recording or you're here live on neuroinsight@rcsi.ie. All the information that I've been through here today is up on our website, neuroinsight.eu. There you'll find the guide for applicants, the terms and conditions for the program, some of those ideas that I've been talking through, the directory of supervisors, and the link to the grant portal. So if you go onto the call for proposal page, you'll find a link out to the grant application portal. And my primary method for getting information out is always going to be on Twitter. So do follow us on neuroinsight.eu. And thanks to our funders, that is the European Commission, but also SFI through the Insight and Future Neuro Centres. And thanks to our host, the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, which is a university based here in Dublin. Okay, no questions. I'm going to end things here. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks if you come and watch this on a recording, for listening to me for an hour. And if you are putting in a proposal, and I hope you do, then do get in touch, and best of luck.